Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Dani, and today Great.com talks with Sarah Conley, the Conservation Coordinator of the International Elephant Foundation, or IEF. If you haven't heard of them, they support conservation awareness and scientific programs that enhance the survival of elephants and protect their habitats worldwide. If you're new here to this podcast, as always, remember to press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app. Now, hi, Sarah, and welcome.
Hi, Danny. It's great to meet you. Great to be here.
It's great to meet you too, and thank you for taking time to talk to us today. We are looking forward to learn more about the International Elephant Foundation. I'm not sure how many organizations taking care of elephants. I'm going to use this expression we have interviewed before, but definitely we would like to know more about your approach. I usually tell folks that we begin with history here because it's an important aspect, it's an important starting point, I believe. So, how did it all begin for you guys? How did IEF came into existence?
Great. Yeah, and I would love to tell you more about IEF's background. So in 1998, the executive director of the Fort Worth Zoo, a man named Michael Foraker, called upon his friends who are luminaries in elephant care and conservation from zoos, private facilities, veterinarians, and conservationists. And they all got together because they were frustrated with the lack of funding for good conservation and research efforts. And honestly, there weren't that many options at the time for funding, and the existing funds weren't getting to the actual projects. There were lots of big organizations with heavy overhead and expensive PR campaigns, but not things getting to what we now call boots on the ground conservation. So they officially founded IEF to fill that void, joining forces to each contribute a significant amount of money themselves to create a pool of conservation funding that can then be used for projects, but also leveraged to generate more funds. And this year, we're actually celebrating our 25th anniversary, and we have provided since then over $9 million to over 250 projects since our inception. So we're pretty proud of that.
As you should. This is a long road. And I like this aspect of really being more hands-on, right? Boots on the ground approach to it, because there is a difference. I feel like the way that sometimes we address certain topics it's a bit distant, and that actually might be because we don't really know what's going on, right? What are the challenges or are the threats. So maybe it's an important thing actually now to address this. So what would you say there are the key threats facing elephant populations today? And then a step further, how do you guys address them?
Okay, yeah. Well, so everyone knows about poaching, but there's also human-elephant conflict and habitat loss and degradation. This year, IEF has 24 projects in 15 countries that address these problems, each based on the specific needs of the location and the likelihood of success and sustainability. So you have elephants who are facing security problems, everything from snares and poaching and wildlife crime, illegal harvesting of wildlife products, to human-elephant conflict, where people are not able to live in harmony with the wildlife around them. So, in the United States, if someone has a deer in their backyard, that's a big deal. In India, it might be a giant Asian elephant. Same in Africa, it could be an African elephant right next to where you live. That creates a lot of problems. Safety, security, destruction of livelihood if they raid their crops, things like that. And then habitat loss and degradation. So the more you have communities who are reliant on, say, cutting down parts of the natural parks or habitats for firewood or things like that, that degrades the quality of that habitat, and the wildlife, especially the elephants, will leave that area looking for resources to survive. And that oftentimes pushes them into human settlements, and that creates more of that wildlife conflict. So, for example, IEF supports security and anti-poaching efforts by building ranger stations in Uganda, aerial surveillance for the world's last remaining big tuskers in Tsavo, Kenya. But we also do things like habitat and wildlife patrols to help protect critically endangered Sumatran elephants, and that starts bridging the gap between the security needs and the human elephant conflict. We also do a lot of community outreach and education in places like Kenya and Namibia and Cameroon and Nepal, all over. Ways to teach people best practices for living safely alongside wildlife. And on top of all of that, we support research efforts into elephant diseases to develop treatments, vaccines, ways to benefit all elephants worldwide. And that includes the actual recent vaccine for protective immunity against elephant endotheliotropic herpes virus that was just put in an elephant about a month ago. So that's a big step.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of activities, right? A lot of aspects to cover. It's a really plural approach, I would call. And I want to take something that you mentioned. I feel like it's an aspect that requires a lot of sensibility, right? That is this conflict with humans, because there is the needs of the community, the security of the community, but on the other hand, the needs and security of the elephants as well, the elephant population. How were you guys able to somehow balance these efforts? Because I believe that there are effort dedicated to protecting the elephants, but also efforts dedicated to supporting these local communities in these challenges. How do you balance those two things?
That's a great question. And honestly, the goals of protecting elephants and supporting local communities go hand in hand or hand in trunk. Uh, Imagine that instead of squirrels or deers in your backyard, you have elephants, and these elephants eat your crop, destroying a year's worth of income in one night, or smash through the walls of your house to eat the food that you have stored inside. This is going to create an adversarial relationship, maybe cause retaliatory killing, all kinds of terrible things. But then again, you are the one who lives alongside wildlife, which means that at the end of the day, it's that community, it's that farmer, it's that family who are going to make the final decisions about whether we are able to preserve wildlife or not. So that means that you can't divorce one need from the other. If you don't help the community, you will not be able to help elephants and vice versa. So IEF is committed to creating a community consensus for conservation, so to speak, where families and individuals, stakeholders work together to protect and preserve their natural heritages. Uh, so, as far as we're concerned, if a farmer or a family doesn't know where his next meal is coming from, he has no motivation, and nor should he, to care about protecting the elephants or giraffe or rhino, who whatever wildlife is nearby. So we provide a lot of community outreach, a lot of education, training for alternative livelihoods, community protection, ways to help farmers protect their crops, ways to help them transition to maybe less palatable crops so that instead of growing corn or maize, they're growing ginger or chili peppers, things that elephants don't want to come eat. Uh, but ultimately, it's those people who will determine the future of elephants and all wildlife. And so we need to work together with them. They need to be partners in the projects.
Absolutely. And one thing that I keep thinking here is for the size of these operations and the different locations that you are working, right? It must require different kinds of partnerships, maybe with the local communities, as you just said, but also other organizations or maybe governments. So, how do partnerships with these organizations enhance maybe the effectiveness of your conservation work? And do they have really this impact that I'm seeing?
Absolutely. And you're completely right. Collaboration partnerships are key to making any sort of sustainable change. And it's essential. For example, IEF has supported the construction of 15 ranger stations in Uganda's Murchison Falls National Park. And that's helped to reclaim that park from poachers. But this couldn't be done without collaboration from the Ugandan Wildlife Authority, which is a government agency, and a local NGO, the Uganda Conservation Foundation. We can't come in and say, this is where you need a ranger station or you need this technology. We have to talk to the rangers and they need to tell us what they need. They need to identify the hotspots. So it is so important to get that feedback and to work together. And government involvement, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We support projects in Bhutan that are actually led by government forestry officials. In Indonesia, the elephant response units on the island of Sumatra that help protect habitat for this critically endangered subspecies of Asian elephant, they only exist because of government permission. And the government recognizes their success so much that they have asked for the creation of additional units. So it is so vital to have that kind of cooperation from every level, government, other NGOs, right down to the people. In Nepal, a lot of our projects deal with creating elephant response teams within the citizenry themselves, where they work with their neighbors to create and share best practices on living alongside wildlife. So you have that community involvement that changes, provides education, practices, implementation of best practices, and none of that can happen without that involvement. Because if you don't have that investment from every level, whether it's government or NGOs or the people, then anything you teach, anything that you try to change will only last while the project leaders and the money are there. It won't be sustainable and it won't have legs. It won't create a lasting positive influence. And that's really what we're focused on, is having lasting good change, not just, a good photo op.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really resonates with what you said earlier about educating people, making it part of their livelihood in a level, right? Because other than that, it's just speech. It's not real action. That's absolutely true. Let's get our focus back on the elephants because we've been talking about communities and people and all of this. But I think it would be really interesting as well to know, how do you monitor these populations, right? What strategies and maybe what technologies are you using to keep up with them and make sure that they are, having a good life? They're really, the population is growing, what what goes on?
Absolutely. So there's no one size fits all. And when you're in the field, it you don't have a gas station or readily available electricity always. Sometimes you don't even have Wi-Fi. So we have to approach it based on what each region needs. So, say in communities that live in buffer zones with wildlife areas, the technology that we're going to use might be low power, solar powered polywire fencing to protect communities and farms. But then in other areas, if we're trying to learn about habitat usage or population numbers, we're going to have camera traps or maybe do some GPS collaring to learn about herd movement. Um, and then that we can monitor with satellite tracking later on. We can go in and check the camera traps, things like that. Um, if we're talking extremely low tech, you might go out there and do some population surveys where you are viewing the elephants from afar and you watch them defecate. And as soon as they leave the area, you go in there with a glove and you grab some of that fresh scat. And then you store that and you can learn about sort of population genetics by analyzing that scat. So we have that's high tech in one way and also very low tech because you are literally picking up poop. Um, in other regions, we do like some of the outreach that I was talking about. Some of that's very low tech. That's just community meetings. Some of it's more high tech by having community film nights, which here it's you think, oh, are they going to a movie theater? No, it's literally projecting on the side of a wall or on a sheet that's been hung up. So there's a lot of different technology that's used, and it's sort of on a situational basis. Obviously, you got to tailor the approach. But to go back to some of the community stuff, we also use what we've learned to help make their lives better. So, like teaching climate smart agriculture so that they can get better yields, better crops with less water and with less techniques and things like that. Or alternative fuel stoves, briquette making, so that they don't have to go into wildlife habitat and maybe secretly clear and cut down uh, flora. So it's important to look at the project of and look at the region and then tailor the technology that way. But you'd be surprised at how low tech some of this stuff really is.
Well, I have a friend that has a saying that is sometimes we need to sort to the things that are simple but work. And I feel like this is an example of it. We don't really need to go high tech. We just need to see what is effective, right? So yeah, and it's creative in a level, if you think. So it's absolutely wonderful solutions. Sarah, I'm gonna make a small detour here to actually a pause to tell people to go to your page, right? Elephantconservation.org, because in there you can get a lot more information than we'll be able to talk here today. You can learn more about elephants. You can learn more about the programs they have, the regions, the initiatives, what is really going on, and you can get in touch. We're going to talk about getting in touch later, but definitely go there to learn more and understand the different ways that we can help elephant populations to, don't go extinct. This is very, very important. I want to talk now, Sarah, about these organizational challenges that I know that happen, right? Especially in a venture like this. Again, it's a big project with a topic that sometimes people don't really understand the importance, don't really see why we should be really investing money on this kind of thing. So maybe could you discuss with us, could you tell us what challenges or maybe setbacks that your organization faces, and how do you find ways to overcome it, to adapt and to overcome it?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, IEF has been very lucky in that we haven't had a lot of catastrophic issues to deal with. Like most charities, we were scared during the COVID pandemic. And thanks to really the meticulous financial practices of our board and making sure that uh, we never allocate funds that we don't have, we were able to continue support for all of our projects and not renege on any commitments that we had. But the main limiter on all of our work has always been funding. And yes, that's that's a cliche, but for example, we just put out a call for proposals for projects for 2025, and we received over 100 proposals. And that's over 100 different populations, elephant regions around the world that need help. That's more than any one organization could ever do. And there are many more qualified projects than any NGO can support. So we always have to make difficult choices. Beyond that, a lot of our projects, we have hurdles that are sort of unpredictable. So like a couple years ago, we had a project in Ethiopia that was on maybe indefinite hiatus because of a civil war that was happening. If the people are having a civil war, elephant conservation is not high on the list. And that's understandable, but it just shows how everything we do is really intertwined with wildlife and nature, and how you wouldn't think that an elephant population would necessarily suffer because of political unrest, but it does. And then just random administrative stuff. Like we had a project that was having a difficult time securing government permission in India and different things like that. So because we're working everywhere, because it's literally a global problem, you have these kind of random little just things that you have to deal with that you don't predict. And I wish I could say that there's some sort of flowchart that you can go to and fix it and like, oh, if I do this, then we'll do this and then everything will be fine. And it really just you have to meet every challenge where it's at because sometimes you just can't predict that there's going to be a civil war or that there's going to be whatever unrest there is. So you have to, we really work hard to make sure that we look at the entire ecological scape because like I said, human actions impact wildlife and vice versa. So the political instability is going to connect with the management of wildlife parks, with the need to create more rare earth mineral mines and things like that that may cut off migratory patterns to different things. So your cell phone may be harming elephant conservation and you don't even know it because of the rare earth minerals that are in your phone that are destroying wildlife habitat. So these are all the challenges that seemingly come out of nowhere that we're dealing with all the time.
Well, thank you for sharing this. I really had no idea of some of those things. Yeah. And it really helps us put in perspective, right? The kinds of actions that we just take for granted in a level we don't really stop to think about. And absolutely, I feel it's vital that we look at them in a different manner. So, yes, thank you for sharing this. And thinking on strategies to overcome these challenges. Some of them are indeed related to funding, right? We cannot ignore that. We cannot like reduce their importance or think that they are other than this. So for our listeners and people watching on YouTube, what would be the best ways to help you guys keep going?
So our goal in everything is to create a sustainable future where elephants thrive. And ideally, if we can achieve that, we've made ourselves obsolete, which would be a wonderful thing. So with that in mind, we work every day to make sure that 85 to 90% of all donations go directly to that boots on the ground conservation. So to help IEF, you can do everything you can. It doesn't just have to be donations. It can be going to our website, like you said, looking at our interactive project of maps, learning about those challenges, attending our monthly free conservation chats where you can directly connect with one of our project leaders in the field and learn more, share our social media memes and amplify the message to your personal group so that everyone in your world, we raise the awareness of elephants and their needs, things like that. We offer online replays of our online virtual symposia so you can learn what the cutting edge of conservation actions is going on. So there are things that you can do that are very low lift, right? Go to Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, follow at Elephants IEF, and you can get really cool elephant photos while you're sharing and learning about wildlife and elephants. If you want to go more, you can retweet them and share them and heart them and amplify the content. But really, the bottom line is that there's so much work to be done that anything you can do is helpful. So whether that's making sure that you don't contribute to habitat loss by only buying things made with sustainable palm oil, or making sure you recycle your used electronics so less rare earth minerals need to be mined, or donating to IEF or any other conservation organization that you feel strongly about, that's great because, the high tide lifts all boats. The more we can do, the more we can help everyone, the better our wildlife will be, and hopefully we will become obsolete. We won't need organizations like ours anymore.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a really wonderful conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. This was a joy.
Oh, it was a pleasure to us. And to everyone listening, also thank you very much for joining us for this more episode. And remember, if you liked it, press subscribe on YouTube, your podcast app, all of this. Share this in your social media with your friends, with your family, coworkers, everyone. Give a shout out to this important thing. And above all, go to their page. The link is right here under the description of this episode. I think that's the really best way. You can get their socials through their page. You can get information. You can get in touch with them in different platforms. So really, really is the best way. And help us spread the word about the importance of the International Elephant Foundation. Bye, guys, and I see you in the next episode.